Ladies and gentlemen, we meet today not in the quiet comfort of abstract theory. We meet while the smoke still curls from the craters in Kashmir, and while the echoes of the sirens from this past May still ring in the A's of South Asia. The opposition will tell you that New Delhi is a rational actor in a dangerous neighborhood. I'll tell you that is a lie. The opposition will try to sell you a story of security dilemmas and deterrence. Do not buy it. India's policy towards Pakistan is no longer about the line of control. It is about the line of credit, the political credit that Narendra Modi needs to withdraw from the bank of public fear every single time his domestic popularity crashes. Now, before I dismantle the machinery up behind their lies, it is my great pleasure to introduce my great friends inside opposition. Speaking first is a very good friend of mine and my chief of staff, Viraansh Bhanushali. Viraansh, is also an Indian. My first chief of staff was also an Indian. But my first chief of staff lasted only a little bit longer than the Rafale jets in an airspace. You would have thought that I had learned my lesson from that. But no, I picked my second chief of staff to be an Indian as well. But after working with both of them, I can personally say I have lived through India's entire Pakistan policy. Because Viraansh is exactly like that. Loud, high on emotion, and when everything goes wrong, instead of introspecting and reflecting that he, like the Indians, resorts to only one tactic: blame the Pakistani president. His girlfriend breaks up with him. What does Viraansh do? Blame the Pakistani president. He gets punched in the face by a mobster. What does Viraansh do? Blame the Pakistani president. And if he loses his election tomorrow, I'm telling you, trust me, he will blame the Pakistani president. Speaking next is Viraansh Banerjee, a DPhil in the business school and another very good friend of mine. Now, Viraansh has run in 2 Oxford Union elections in the past, and sadly, he lost both of them. Now, after those stinging defeats, he has decided to take a page out of the BJP's election playbook, which is what? Stand in a chamber, blame the Pakistanis for everything, and you too can win an election you otherwise would have lost, Viraansh. Speaking third is Sid Nagrath. Now, Sid too, an Indian, served as chief of staff to a previous ex-Pakistani president. Now, if Pakistan really represents such a security challenge, then after so many Pakistani presidents working so well with the Indian chief of staff, they would have heard some reports of some terrorism happening. But let me be clear in my speech. My target is not the Indian citizens, who themselves are a great victim to this lie. But my target is the architect of this lie. I stand here to expose the regime of Narendra Modi, a government that has turned the world's largest democracy into the world's largest stage for hate. How one man's reckless electoral pandering is endangering the lives and the hopes of billions of people. This is not a security policy. It is a populist strategy, written in saffron ink and sealed with the blood of soldiers, designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to keep a regime in power by manufacturing a permanent enemy. Let us look at the facts, not the propaganda, but the blood-stained facts. On the 7th of May, 2025, the Indian Air Force launched Operation Sindoor. They called it a surgical strike. The Indian media cheered. They showed you graphics of fighter jets destroying terror camps. But let me tell you what they did not show you. Let me take you to the city of Bahawalpur. Let me tell you about the mosque that was not a training camp, but a place of worship, whose domes were shattered by Indian missiles while people knelt in prayer. Pakistani authorities reported that 31 innocent civilians were killed. 15 of them were children. 15 children torn from their mothers, not by accident, but by a calculated act of aggression. While Mr. Modi's news anchors were celebrating precision, Pakistani fathers were digging through concrete. That is the cost of security policy. And for what? When the tragedy, and it is a severe tragedy, what happened at Pahalgam. On the 23rd of April, after that tragedy, our Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif stood before the world and condemned what happened in Pahalgam. He did not ask for war. He asked for truth. He offered a joint independent international inquiry. He opened the door to investigators. And what did Mr. Modi do? Did he pick up the phone? Did he send a diplomat? Did he provide a single shred of credible evidence to the United Nations? No. He sent the Air Force. Independent observers and the multiple media sources reported that India struck before any evidence was verified. And why is that the case? Well, because a joint inquiry takes time. And Mr. Modi did not have time. He had an election to win. Mr. Speaker, I will set out the anatomy of their spectacle. Watch the choreography. What is the step one? A tragedy happens. Step two, before the bodies even get cold, the media frenzy begins. Not asking who did this, but screaming revenge. And step three, the missiles fly. They call this security, but let's just call it for what it is. It is populism in uniform. And it's worked, didn't it? Look at the headlines from this week. In November 2025, the BJP swept the elections in Bihar. The same commentators who said Modi was finished are now calling him the protector. He sold them fear, and that bought him a landslide. That is the policy of transaction. It is not a policy of defense. It is not a policy of distraction. But Mr. Speaker, to call this mere electioneering is to be dangerously naive. This is not just about one election. It is about a soul. The soul of the current Indian regime is fascist. We must speak the truth that polite diplomacy tries to hide. Prime Minister Modi is not a lone actor. He's the obedient soldier of RSS. You cannot understand Modi without understanding the RSS, and you cannot understand the RSS without understanding the sentence that their ideologue, Golwarkar, wrote about Nazi Germany. He called Nazi Germany a good lesson for us in Hindustan to learn and profit by. That is the ideology that sits in the Prime Minister's office today. That is the legacy his leadership lies on. From the ashes of the Gujarat riots in 2002, where Mr. Modi presided over the slaughter of 1,000 Muslims, to the destruction of the Babri Masjid, their playbook has remained consistent. Power is consolidated by manufacturing a permanent enemy. Their version of a Hindu Rashtra, a pure ethno-religious state, cannot exist without an other. They need Pakistan. Right? You have to stand up, you want to point information. Denied, so sit down. They need Pakistan. If Pakistan disappeared tomorrow, the BJP would have to invent us. Because without the monster next door, they would have to answer to their own people for the hunger, the poverty, and the economic turbulence. So let me tell you again, they do not fight because we are a threat to their borders. They fight us because we are necessary for their ballots. Mr. Speaker, the opposition will tell you that these military actions are driven by intelligence. I tell you they are driven by the Election Commission of India's calendar. Let's look at the timeline. It's not a conspiracy. It's a clockwork pattern that insults the intelligence of this House. Picture the scene in late 2016. The BJP is fighting a losing battle for the heart of Uttar Pradesh. The polls were clear, the outcome looked grim. So what did Modi do? He turned a terrorist attack, a tragedy in Uri, into a political spectacle. And just like that, a looming defeat was transformed into a political landslide victory. Fast forward to 2019, the general election is looming, and the government's economic report card is weak. But just like before, the narrative flips. Suddenly, we have Pulwama, we have Balakot. The Prime Minister's platform pivots instantly from creating jobs to teaching Pakistan a lesson and defending India. And what's the result? History repeats itself. Another landslide victory. And now, in 2025 April, the BJP was staring at a loss in the Bihar elections. They already suffered below expectation results in the 2024 Lok Sabha elections, and the people were asking questions that the government could not answer. And so what happened? Like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat, we got Operation Sindoor in May. Mr. Modi lies to his people. He mocks their intelligence, and innocent Pakistani lies pay the price. Mr. Modi does not address domestic unemployment. He does not address domestic inequality. He does not address the economic slowdown. And why? because he's incapable of doing so. He lies to the Indian people that Pakistan is the threat. He lies to them that Pakistan is the obstacle to their progress. He lies to them that Pakistan is a danger waiting across the border. Denied. Sit down. But members, these are not security assessments. They're political calculations. Every time an election nears, the drums of war grow louder. Every time his approval dips, his rhetoric of fear rises. Every time accountability approaches, the cross-border strikes mysteriously reappear. And what's the greatest tragedy of it all? Is that his strategy undermines the very security that it claims to protect. Innocent civilians die so his premiership can live another day. And if that were not enough, they have now crossed a line that civilization itself held sacred. Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about the Indus Waters Treaty. On April the 23rd, 2025, India announced the suspension of this treaty, a pact that had survived 3 wars. But they did not stop at announcements. Using water, it's the basic human right, as a weapon of war is not just despicable, but it's an act of hydroterrorism. They are threatening to parch the throats of our children. They are threatening to turn the breadbasket of Punjab into a dust bowl. Since when? Since when did a security policy involve starving a neighbor? Since when did the right to thirst become a tool of diplomatic leverage? By holding a vital resource, a vital shared resource hostage, Delhi has signaled to the world that it is willing to weaponize nature itself. This is not the behavior of a regional superpower. It is the behavior of a neighborhood bully who thinks respect can be demanded at the tap of a dam. Mr. Speaker, members of the House, when water becomes a bargaining chip and not a human right, you know this is not about security. It is about cruelty. And cruelty is the last refuge of a populist tyrant. Mr. Speaker, we must lift our eyes from the border to the horizon. If you truly want to understand the architecture of Mr. Modi's India, do not look to Gandhi's spinning wheel, but look to Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet. What we are witnessing is the Israelization of Indian statecraft. Mr. Modi and Mr. Netanyahu are ideological twins. They are brothers in hate. Netanyahu survives by invoking the eternal threat of the Arabs, and Modi is surviving by invoking the eternal threat of the Muslims. Both represent a dangerous shift from civic nationalism to ethno-religious nationalism. Zionism claims that the land is for the Jews alone. Hindutva claims that the land is for the Hindus alone. Both leaders use this permanent politics of siege, Berja. And both leaders use this permanent politics of siege to dismantle their own judiciaries, control their own press, and escape their own corruption scandals. And where do we see the darkest laboratory for this? It's in Kashmir. The opposition will call Kashmir an internal matter for the Indians. I call it a settler colonial project. Today, Kashmir is the most militarized zone in the world. There is 1 soldier for every 10 Kashmiris. Think about that ratio. That is not about protection. That is not about security. That is a prison. Mr. Modi abrogated Article 370, not to integrate the region, but to conquer it. They are importing settlers from the mainland to change the demographics, to turn a Muslim majority into a Muslim minority in their own ancestral home. This is not security policy. It is demographic engineering sold as integration. Members of the House, Mr. Speaker, I conclude with this. The opposition might ask, does India not have legitimate security concerns? Of course they do. So does Pakistan. So does every nation in this fractured world. But there's a difference. There's a difference between a surgeon who cuts to heal and a butcher who cuts to sell his meat. And Mr. Modi has never lifted a scalpel for his country's security, only a butcher's knife to secure his own elections. This policy, this cycle of strikes, suspension of treaties, manufactured hysteria is not a cure, it is a poison. And here's the tragedy. Here's the real tragedy of all of this. The ultimate victim of this poison is not Pakistan. We are resilient. We have survived wars. We have survived floods. We have survived the loss of our children. We have survived Mr. Modi's ego. To the Indian students in the chamber, my friends, we are your partners in the future that we will inherit together. One of the biggest victims of terrorism is Pakistan itself. We have lost over 80,000 of our own men, women, and children. $150 billion of economic damage done to the country. Why would anyone burn their own house down to attack their neighbor? Why would we do this? We speak the same language. We share the same cinema and the same music. My argument today is against those who are hijacking the soul of your country to build their power on fear. Being sold a lie. You're being told that your safety requires the hunger of your neighbor. You're being told that to be a patriot, you must hate those with the same language, same culture, and same customs. But let me remind you, the fire that your government is lighting on the border will not just stay on the border. It will come home. And that fire will burn your press freedom, it will burn your independent courts, and it will burn the secular soul that once made India a light in the world. This security policy is a fraud. It is a populism. It is populism that risks nuclear winter just to secure a political summer. I ask this House, do not applaud the arsonist just because he wears a uniform. Do not validate a strategy that trades the blood of soldiers for the ballot of politicians. Vote for the proposition. Vote to tell the truth that the politics of fear is a game we are no longer willing to play. Vote that yes, India's policy to Pakistan is a populist strategy sold in a lie as a security policy. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. Thank you for the passionate speech. I yield the chair back to the President.
I thank myself for my speech. I now look to my great Chief of Staff, Viraansh Bhanushali, to lead the case for side opposition.
Mr. President, honorable members of the Union, our distinguished guests on the proposition bench, thank you for the floor. I rise today, the day after the solemn anniversary that haunts every Mumbaikar, to oppose the motion that India's policy towards Pakistan is populism disguised as security policy. Apologies for the mic. In plain terms, I stand here to tell you that not only is this claim false, but it is a fundamental misreading of my country's reality. And I do so not just as a member of the Oxford Union, but as a Mumbaikar, but as someone who has lived through the consequences of the India-Pakistan saga in his own home and heart. Yesterday was 26/11, November 26th, which in my city is not an ordinary date on the calendar. It marks the day when, in 2008, 10 terrorists stormed across iconic sites across my hometown, unleashing 3 days of bloodshed. One of those targets was Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Terminus, the very station that my aunt passed through almost every evening. By chance or by providence, she took a different train home that night, narrowly escaping the fate of the 166 souls that did not. Another target was the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, where my best friend's father, a major in the National Security Guard, was one of the first commandos to rappel into a burning inferno. I was a schoolboy then, glued to the television as my city burnt. I remember the fear in my mother's voice on the phone, the tension in my father's clenched jaw. For 3 nights, Mumbai did not sleep, and neither did I. As a child, I learned too early that security is not an abstract policy issue. It is the difference between life and death, the difference between a phone call from a loved one or a silence that lasts forever. I share this, not to darken the mood, but to ground this debate in reality. For me, this isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's painfully personal. The railway station, 200 meters from my childhood home, was bombed in the 1993 serial blasts that killed over 250 people. I grew up under the shadows of these tragedies. My parents, who are here in the chamber tonight, listening anxiously to their son, raised me with the stories of those dark days and the mantra that we must always be alert. So when someone claims that India's tough stance towards Pakistan is merely populism masquerading as security policy, you might understand why I bristle. It sounds like someone telling you that the locks on your doors are just for show, not because there are robberies in the neighborhood. But before we delve deeper into that notion, let me first address the three gentlemen arrayed against me. A rather formidable proposition bench, if there ever was one. They say this house loves a good show. My opponents have certainly delivered on the casting. First, we have our union president, Mr. Moosa Harraj, leading the charge for the proposition. Moosa is not only the president of this union, he's also a Pakistani by birth and a very, very dear friend of mine. In fact, as his chief of staff, I've spent months working with him, which makes tonight a tad bit awkward, because technically, I'm supposed to make him look good. But here I am, last night, writing his speech for him. Moosa, you've had an interesting term, haven't you? Just a few weeks ago, he
Point of
said...
information.
Yes.
So you're admitting in a chamber that what I just said was written by an Indian you.
To respond... I shall gladly admit that sometimes it takes an Indian to clean up the incompetence of a Pakistani. Now, Moosa, you've had an interesting term, haven't you? Just a few weeks ago, Moosa survived a historic no-confidence vote right here in the Oxford Union. For the uninitiated, yes, Oxford Union presidents sometimes face more rebellions than actual heads of state. The vote failed, and Moosa sailed through unscathed with a thumping majority, making him, arguably, the only Pakistani origin leader in history to face a no-confidence vote and remain in power the next morning. I tease my friend, of course, but there's a serious point. Moosa's victory was a triumph of transparent, open, and democratic processes. An Oxford Union specialty. Now, only if some folks in Rawalpindi could say the same. And look who sits with you. The glorious ghost of the presidency's past. We have Ahmed Nawaz, the president for Michaelmas term 2022. Ahmed, you're a man of resilience. You survived the horrors of the APS attack. You have my utmost respect for that for the rest of my life. But you also survived, barely so, the internal politics of this chamber. You hold the unique distinction of being the only Pakistani president in history who was not removed by a coup, but an auto-resignation. An auto-resignation for missing access committee meetings. Now, the official record says that you were busy. We all saw the Instagram stories of you doing shots with Bad Baby. Now, does an Oxford Union president have to be caught outside? Following on, we have Isra Khan, the president of Hillary term 2025. Isra, this is a special moment for me. In my first term here, you were Ahmed's chief of staff. You were the man behind the throne. You watched him fall, you fought the dirty politics, and like a true survivor, you climbed the ladder to become president yourself. I'm the chief of staff now. I have seen the walk that you walked. I have taken notes. You taught me that the Oxford Union, like in Islamabad, chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. So when I look at you over there, arguing against India having mastered British institutional survivalism, I don't know whether to rebut you or ask you for a reference letter. Now, are we all acquainted with the spirit of the Oxford Union debate? A bit of bite, a bit of banter. Let's get to the meat of the matter. The motion asserts that India's policy towards Pakistan is populism disguised as security policy. In other words, that India cynically fashions its Pakistan strategy just to win votes or applause rather than to genuinely protect itself. As the first speaker of the opposition, I reject this wholeheartedly. I will show you, step by step, how India's policy is primarily driven by legitimate security concerns and not cheap populism. And in doing so, I should also flip the mirror to our friends, because if any nation has suffered from the leaders who wrap themselves in the flag of popularity, it isn't India, it is Pakistan. The proposition's argument is seductive. It suggests that the Indian states manufacture its threats. We invent boogeymen, that we use the border as a ballot box to whip up votes. They argue that when India strikes back, we're not protecting our citizens, we're performing for them. To win this debate, I do not need to use rhetoric. I simply need to use a calendar. If the proposition is true, if the Indian security policy is just populism, then crises should corroborate with the elections. The bomb should go off when the polls open. Let us look at the data and let us be inductive. I grew up in the heart of Mumbai. My home was not too far from where in March 1993, RDX explosives ripped through Plaza Cinema. It was a part of a coordinated series of 12 blasts that turned my city into a morgue. 257 people died. I was not born there, but I grew up with the crater it left in our psyche. Now ask yourself, was there an election in March 1993? No. That election was 3 years away. Was the government looking for a populist distraction? No. The government was weak. The economy was opening up and we were desperate for stability. Terror did not come because we needed a vote. It came because Dawood and the ISI wanted to fracture India's financial spine. That was not populism. That was an act of war. I remember my aunt, once again, vividly, traveling through Chhatrapati Shivaji terminus. She pulled out of the train station at 9:27 p.m. and the terrorists entered at 9:30. 3 minutes is the difference between my aunt watching from home tonight and her being engraved in a memorial stone in South Bombay. 10 men held the city of 20 million hostage. Now look at the policy response. The proposition says that India is populist. What would a populist government do after 2611? The public rage was nuclear. I remember it. We wanted blood. We wanted the Air Force to flatten the training camps in Mudarke. A populist leader would have just launched the jets to win the next election. But the government of the day, the Congress party, chose strategic restraint. They chose diplomacy. They chose to send dossiers. They appealed to the international community. They appealed to you. Did it work? Did the non-populist approach buy us peace? No. It bought us Pathankot. It bought us Uri. It bought us Pulwama. We learned a hard lesson, Mr. President. You cannot shame a state that has no shame. Let's move to the present. 6 months ago, the proposition claims the skirmishes this May were electioneering. Check the dates. The elections for the Indian General Parliament were over. The government was secure. Apologies. The government was secure. On 22nd of April, terrorists from the Resistance Front, a cheap rebrand of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, attacked tourists in Pahalgam. They dragged out 26 people and killed them for their religion. They didn't ask who they voted for. They executed them. India's response, Operation Sindoor, was launched on the 7th of May. Note the name, Sindoor, the vermilion mark of a Hindu wife. It was not Operation Thunder or Operation Wrath. It was named for the widows created by that massacre. It was a surgical dismantling of 9 launch pads. We degraded radar systems in Lahore. We punished the perpetrators. And then what? We stopped. We did not invade. We did not occupy. We did not hold a parade in Delhi. We re-established deterrence and went back to work. That is not populism. That is professionalism. The proposition confuses popular with populist. Yes, Mr. President, defending your citizens from being murdered is popular. Providing clean water is popular. Keeping the railways safe is popular. That does not make it a trick. Populism is promising easy answers to complex problems. Security is doing the hard, expensive, dangerous work of ensuring that a child in Dadar can go to the cinema without being blown up. But if you want to see the actual populism disguised as security, you must only look across the Radcliffe line. When India launched Operation Sindoor, how did Pakistan respond? Did it fix its security gaps? No. Operation Bunyan al-Masoos was launched. The solid cemented wall, a Quranic reference designed not for tactical efficacy, but for religious mobilization. You launched missiles at our bases in Udhampur, had them shot down, had 11 bases struck, and achieved at best a tactical stalemate. And then, after all of that, what do? You release a music video. The ISPR, your military's PR wing, released an anthem, Dharkan Pe Ek Hi Naam, Pakistan. Mr. President, when India fights a war, we debrief the pilots. In Pakistan, they auto-tune the chorus. You held victory rallies on the 16th of May. You declared a national holiday. Why? Because you cannot give your people bread, so you must give them the circus. You cannot fix the price of flour, so you fixate on the Indian threat. You need the enemy of the gate. Without the Indian monster, your own people may turn around and ask why generals own Papa John's franchises while the country defaults on its loans. That is populism. That is the alchemy of turning public poverty into private power with the specter of war. When you vote for this motion, you are telling the widows of Pahalgam that their grief is just a prop for the government. You are telling my parents sitting right there that the fear that they felt when the windows shook in '93, or the panic they felt when my aunt didn't answer the phone in 2008 was just a disguise. It's easy to deconstruct security policy in the Oxford Union. Our walls are thick, our windows are well plastered. The world feels safe. We can debate narratives and discourse over port and cheese, but out there in the real world, the wolf is at the door. India has decided to stop feeding the wolf. We've decided to stop sending it dossiers. We have decided to shoot it. That is not populism. That is the biological imperative of a nation that refuses to die. We do not want war. We want to be boring neighbors. We want to trade onions and electricity. We want to play your cricket team without worrying if the away team is bringing bats to C4. But until the state that defends itself stops using terror as an instrument of foreign policy, we will keep our powder dry, we will keep our radars on, and we will keep our guards up. If that is populism, then I am a populist. If that is a disguise, then I will wear it, because the alternative is not liberalism. The alternative is 2611 on repeat. Tonight, I may have been belligerent in defending my country's stance, but I also hope that I've been fair and factual. I do not hate Pakistan. I truly wish to see a Pakistan that is safe, stable, prosperous, and at peace with us. I dream of a day where I could take a train from Mumbai to Lahore and have kebabs in Gawar Mandi, or when the Indian cricket team captain and the Pakistani cricket team captain can joke about their schools, their kids' schools, because politics has ceased to matter. I'm an idealist by heart, but unfortunately, I'm a realist by circumstance. But for that day to come, we must first deal in truth. And the truth is, calling India's Pakistan policy populism in disguise is a dangerous distortion. It implies that we're all just play acting, that there's no wolf on the door, but there is. Recognizing this wolf doesn't mean we should keep living in fear of it. It just means that we need to know that to have the bigger stick when you're trying to build the bigger fence. Perhaps in a not so distant future, a young debater from Mumbai and a young debater from Lahore, Quetta, or Peshawar will stand here not to argue about war and policy, but to argue about who has the better music or who has the better biryani. Obviously, the answer to both is India. Jokes aside, that is the debate I want to have. We aren't there yet. To get there, we must first ensure that policy is rooted in reality and security and not lost in the fog of propaganda. India is doing its part by treating security with the gravity it deserves. Populism, we leave to the TV studios. Ladies and gentlemen, I beg you to oppose the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Viraansh. You still have a job, so it didn't go that bad. I now look to the ex-president, Regent's Park College, to continue the case for side proposition.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the House, ladies and gentlemen. When the government tells you that this is about security, you should always ask a second question. Security for whom and against what? This motion has two parts to it. First, India's policy, and then that policy wrapped as a security. Tonight, on this side of the House, we already heard from the President. To continue the case for side proposition, I'll focus on this specific element. What policy are we talking about? In order to understand that policy, it is very important to look at it in the domestic context. It's once you understand the domestic policy, then can you only understand the external attitude of India towards Pakistan. And when we speak on this side of the House on this motion, when you talk about India's policy, We are talking about India's policies as we speak now. India's policy under Modi. And on this side of the house, it is our position that this policy is a populist policy. A populist strategy needs enemies of the people. And in India's domestic context, under Narendra Modi, that enemy is drawn from the Muslim population and from minorities, and abroad it is Pakistan. India, tonight I will show you, factually, historically, and morally, that this policy is not a security doctrine. It is a Hindutva populism that does not align with the homogeneous nation that India is, or with the secularism or the constitution of the very state that Modi thinks it stands for. However, it is important before I do that to respond to some points from my friends from side opposition. We already heard from Viraansh, and will continue to hear from Viraansh, that Pakistan propagates terrorism. That Pakistan is a security threat because it poses dangers to the population of India. Let's be clear that Pakistan is the largest victim of terrorism in the South Asia. It has suffered since the war of terror started in 2001, 50,000 people lost to the war on terror. In this very house, Viraansh talked about the terrorist attacks in India. We do not deny that there have been terrorist attacks in India, and our heart goes with the Indian people and with India on that. But it is Pakistan that is the victim of terrorism. In this very house, we have people sitting who have been the survivors of the terrorist attacks that at times have been sponsored by India proxies in Pakistan. It has lost 126 billion since 2001 just to the war on terror. So we, as a nation, have suffered the most when we talk about terrorism. And part of that is also contributed to the proxy wars India is operating in Pakistan. In my state, Balochistan, in the form of supporting the Balochistan Liberation Army, today I cannot walk out after 5 p.m. in my own province because of the proxy elements of India that do not allow for a free flow of Pakistanis to go there or Balochistanis to be there. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan that operates in the tribal areas of Pakistan, that is the largest threat to the sovereignty of Pakistan, is sponsored again by Indian proxies. So when we talk about terrorism, Pakistan is the victim. And yes, India has suffered. But to contribute there to Pakistan is absurdity. Take the example of the recent Pahalgam attack. Pakistan was very open to the world to come and investigate, to put together an international inquiry as to who is responsible for these attacks. Instead of participating in that inquiry, what does Modi do? Because it does not suit him to have inquiries, because it will show that Pakistan is not involved. Instead, he acts in a war of aggression, attacking civilians in Pakistan across the board. Now that is Modi's policy, a policy where he gets a moment, to unite people, the Hindu population in majority against Pakistan. He will take advantage of that. Yeah, sure.
Can a head of state in Pakistan be non-Muslim?
It's extremely irrelevant whether a head of state in Pakistan can be Muslim. The Prime Minister of Pakistan has all the powers, and the Prime Minister of Pakistan can be Muslim, yes. I hope that answers your question. So let's talk about India's policies internally. Let's look into it in Modi's own words. Human Rights Watch analyzed in 2024 alone 173 speeches of Modi before the election. And 110 of those speeches, they were about Islamophobia, the war against minorities in India, all as a pattern to unite the Hindu population, the common population, to create fear, to create a common enemy, so he can utilize that for his own benefits. A prime minister who has been summoned prime minister twice before runs for the third time, and his speeches says the following, the Muslims are infiltrators. They threaten the safety of our children and daughters. He says that the opposition will bulldoze the Ram temple and return Hindu gods to tents, creating fear. Fear that the largest minority in India is the thing to worry about. After this, I will come to you. He goes on. The Muslims are trying to destroy our gods. They are engaging in vote jihad. His words, not my words. Now, these are not dog whistles. These are sirens of hatred. They are open calls for a majoritarian fear, where he's cultivating before every time there is an election, because it works for Modi. This is not democracy, this is not secularism, and this is not security. Now, how the impact it has. First, the impact it has internally. In response to this, Hindu rise in violence, lynching of Muslim minorities, cow protection groups lynching people across India. And again, these are not my reports, these are reports from the Human Rights Watch. And then the impact goes into Kashmir, where the BJP bans Muslim refugees as terrorists, strips Kashmir of its autonomy, and poses discriminatory laws of citizenship. Once you have told 1.4 billion people that Muslims are a threat, you have prepared them to believe that Pakistan, a Muslim majority neighbor, is an existential threat and is an existential enemy. That is how it translates into then an external policy. When you see it as a country of religious zealots, you see it as a security threat because you're not ready for peace and dialogue with them. What do you mean that it has not been stripped of its autonomy? There is a demographic change of population to ensure that a Muslim majority autonomy state converts into a Hindu majority. In international terms, this is apartheid. If today the International Court of Justice investigates India under Modi for its policies, it will be committing apartheid because of its consistent pattern of policies, whether that is demographic changes, whether that is ensuring that the minority is put as the greatest danger to the India as a whole. That is nothing short of populism and populist strategy. But coming back to the points, the threat to security. Every time closer to election, there is an attack. Modi blames Pakistan. We saw this in the 2019 election, the Pulwama Balakot attack. First, in Pulwama, there was a terrorist attack. Modi blames Pakistan. And the next day, we have Modi and India's jet shooting across into Balakot. Again, not very successfully. Come back to the recent 2025 April attack. India launches again into Pakistan, this time with the shining Rafale jets, but fails because Pakistan's military has the ability, it has the power to respond to aggression, but it is also a responsible military that is not acting the way Modi is acting to go into other countries unprovoked. It responded responsibly. And this is again then followed by the international outburst. If you look into Human Rights Watch, for instance, clearly states that Modi policies violate international human rights law, his speeches incite discriminations, BJP-run state bulldoze Muslim homes and collective punishment, violence against Muslims and Christians continues even outside elections, and that Indian minorities live under conditions of systematic, fair, and structural discrimination. Now, this internal structure is what has influenced Modi's policies toward Pakistan through and through, in the form of first attacking directly through unprovoked aggression, in the form of proxy wars in Balochistan, in the form of supporting the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which to this day are operating in Pakistan. Never has Pakistan ever responded that every time there's attack in Balochistan, in Lahore, or has happened last week in Islamabad, we do not come and be like, hey, we have jets and we're going to shoot straight into India. We are a responsible sovereign state. As a responsible sovereign state with a nuclear power, we have the ability, but we have exercised resistance. But in Modi's ways, this is not the case. I have my protected time. That is not the situation in Modi's India. He needs a reason. He needs every time a reason to go for Pakistan, to attack Pakistan. So when you look all of this into full context, this is nothing short of populism, and this is nothing short of a populist policy wrapped under strategic security. But with that being said, Pakistan, as a responsible state, is always open to dialogue, diplomacy. It believes in peace because as we are in this belt, both Pakistan and India share common culture and common language. The irony is that abroad we are best friends, but at home we are the biggest enemies. If it is possible over here, when dialogue is possible here, when friendship is possible here, why can't it be there? This is because we have let the government decide the fate of the citizens of India and maybe for somewhere in Pakistan as well. So I hope, I'll put it on a positive note, that the friendships that are built here across these opposing sides can one day flourish into the same peace that hopefully we can see both across the borders for Pakistan and India. With that, I urge you to propose the motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. I also like to just remind members of the House of the forms of the House. If you have a point of information, you have to stand up, say point of information, then the speaker can either accept or reject, but you have to stand up and say point of information. Otherwise, otherwise it's not a point of information. And points of information should just be that, points of information, not a chance to have a debate with the speaker. Yeah, thank you. I now call upon another very dear friend of mine, Viraansh Bhanushali, to continue the case for side opposition. Thank you.
Mr. President, honorable members of the House, thank you for sticking around. My colleague Viraansh spoke to you with fire. He was from Mumbai. He had seen the multiple terrorist attacks affect his city over the years. I speak to you from a bit of distance. I'm a Calcutta boy. We haven't seen major attacks in some decades. But we were one of the sites of the greatest forced migrations in history since the Holocaust and the Partition. And that was because of some activities Pakistan was up to in the late 60s and early 70s. The part of the city I grew up in was a refugee colony. But suddenly, when Pakistan was no longer on the eastern half of our border, terrorist attacks seemed to have stopped. Ladies and gentlemen, our Pakistan policy is driven by the concerns of our voter, not the machinations of unelected leaders. It is democratically accountable security policy, not populism in disguise. I'm going to make 3 claims in this debate. First, the proposition has a very heavy burden that it has not met. They've not even told you what populist security policy is supposed to be, let alone that India pursues it. We'll try and clarify the definition. Second, unfortunately, they made this a debate about democracy within the country. I wish they didn't do that. India remains a rare, robust democracy in which voters punish governments if they fail on policy issues and injustice. What you're seeing is democratic accountability, not demagoguery. We'll get to the situation in Pakistan during rebuttals. Third, even if we generously assume, and it is true that Pakistan is also a victim of terror, it has been unable or unwilling to stop non-state actors operating from its soil. India's measured response is exactly what international law expects, and if anyone has wrapped populism in security rhetoric, it is not New Delhi, it is Islamabad, and the people of Pakistan have paid a heavy price for it. The burden they meet, ladies and gentlemen, the motion doesn't say India's policy is harsh or flawed. It says it is a con. For that to be true, the government needs to prove 4 things. 1, that India's claims of harm are invented or wildly exaggerated, like populists claim barbarians are at the gate in Europe when it comes to migration. We have shown you time and again with so many examples that India is a genuine victim of terrorist attacks. Second, we have to prove that India bypasses institutions. Populist policy is marked by leaders going around courts, parliaments, professional military, governing by slogan. None of this happens in India. Or what happens a lot in the proposition bench, the military going ahead and capturing parliament. That doesn't happen in India either. Third, leader-centric volatility. Our position on Pakistan is our position on security policy essentially hasn't changed with leaders. One thing you expect when leaders change, there's a pendulum. There is no such pendulum or yo-yo of Indian security policy. It remains as robust and steadfast as ever. Finally, irrational escalation, which is what they're pointing to. But we'll show you that actually whatever we have done has been a careful and stepwise escalation measured on the ladder. So ask yourself, have they shown that the attacks from Pakistani soil, the 93 Bombay blast, the Parliament attack, the Mumbai attack, Uri, Pulwama, were fabricated? Have they told you why Osama bin Laden was found in a luxury compound 800 meters from the National Military Academy? Have they shown to you that the Indian ministers, Indian Prime Minister, defy their generals, do not listen to their civil service, fire their judges, change courts? I don't think none of this, they can't show you any of this because this stuff doesn't happen in India, ladies and gentlemen. If this is populism, it is doing an amazingly good job of looking not like it. Look instead what India has actually done. It is not a story of wild swings. It is actually a stepwise ladder. For years, we have sent dossiers and threats. And actually, to give them credit, sometimes the threats have worked. After the 2001 parliamentary attack, when Vajpayee put troops at the border and called Musharraf, he made JEM and LET banned organizations in Pakistan. It's just that Pakistan has gone from one leadership disaster to the other to the extent where these kinds of actions are no longer seen. But we escalated step by step. In Uri, we did limited cross-LOC strikes. In Balakot, we went up a notch and attacked camps in occupied Kashmir. And then finally, at the end, it's only Pulwama that made us target mainland Pakistan. But remember, we never targeted civilian infrastructure. No dams, no bridges, no hospitals, no schools were deliberately targeted. In fact, as soon as the targets were made, India tried to de-escalate. They said that this is a limited goal of our interaction. We have achieved what we wanted to. This is not a state trying to get applause. It's a state climbing reluctantly, essentially to manage voter pressure. This is something the side opposition doesn't understand because they've not seen a democracy, ladies and gentlemen. Given the political history of our neighbors on the proposition bench, it is understandable. They make a lot of claims about how India, there are people in India who exclude minorities, who want to make India a Hindu Rashtra. There are extreme views within the right in India which argue, which have made life for minorities worse. But by all means, all minorities in India have a much better life than they do in Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, I asked the question if it was possible for a head of state in Pakistan to be Muslim. The answer is false. India has had 2 heads of state who've been Muslim. Also, the BJP, the party they claim to Hitler, Nazi, Netanyahu, any other lazy analogy that they could throw at you, that actually elected a Muslim to be the head of state in India. But that clearly is something that didn't make it to their modest research. In comparative context, India's democracy is unusually robust. We've never had a military coup. And not just in South Asia, where we are ranked leaders, but across the post-colonial context, there are very few examples which have had a sustained democracy all the way since 1947. We have independent courts that strike down the government, including when they try to change how judges are appointed or structures of the court. I just wish sometimes that Pakistan had something like that. We have not taken. We have genuine federalism, ladies and gentlemen. We had linguistic states created by protest and negotiation, a process that goes on. I wish there was some learnings taken on that would create more stability in Pakistan. The argument is not that India is perfect. I would be the first person to admit that there are a lot of flaws in our democracy. The question is, we have the checks and balances, systems of accountability to fix it within ourselves. We have a democracy in tension. They kept mentioning that India has election wherever there is a terrorist attack. But India, ladies and gentlemen, has 28 states. If every year 4 states in India are having an election, if you claim that there was an election in 2019 and 2021, there is a terrorist attack every other year. There are elections, multiple elections. We can't help it. But it's clearly not done for electoral reasons. And India's pride is the fact that its poor, its minorities have voted and participated in the electoral process. We have one of the most extensive affirmative action policies in the world. We have a reasonably strong welfare regime not taken. Policies are electoral compromises made through negotiation, not dictated by generals. No leader, however strong, can ignore the electorate in India. In 2019, with the largest mandate that Prime Minister Modi had, he couldn't push through his preferred and flagship agricultural reforms. The farmers said no. In India, their vote matters, and that was that. Now add to this the collective memory that ordinary voters have had about Pakistan. We mentioned the Mumbai train bombings. They remember 26/11. They remembered that a Pakistani national was captured alive on television. They heard recordings of their handlers. They saw the US convict two co-conspirators and send them to India. They saw Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, a short walk from Pakistan's military academy. They watched Pulwama in high definition on Instagram and TikTok. It is a high burden to ask a society's psychology that if they see beheadings of Daniel Pearl, if they see Pulwama, that wouldn't leave behind a mental scar. But policy should not be dictated by negative emotions. That's what populism would be, and that's what the Indian response hasn't been. If you read it on Twitter, you will constantly hear like people without foresight arguing for things like an invasion of Pakistan, removing it from the map. These are terrible ideas, and these are not ideas that the Indian nation state shares. But what the Indian nation cannot do either is completely repress any views which express this frustration. A democratic polity, they have to carefully and measurably create a response which deters from such action. To sum up, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, in Pakistan, the establishment acquires domestic legitimacy through rhetoric about India. In India, the governments lose legitimacy if they can't provide security. Finally, the third argument. Under the Article 51 of the UN Charter, states have a right to self-defense. However, if it's a non-state actor attacking, it creates a problem. So then response is allowed if the state is unable or unwilling to prevent its territory from being used as a site of attacks. This is what justified the US attack in Abbottabad. This is what UK used as a justification to attack ISIS in Syria. India's position on Pakistan is exactly this. We accept more generously than our own hawks that Pakistan itself is a victim of terror, including the mother of one of the speakers who was supposed to come here. We accept that the state does not control every militant group. But when decade after decade, groups based on Pakistani soil attack Indian citizens and Pakistan cannot dismantle them, India is entitled to act in self-defense. But what does India do? It targets non-state actors. It accompanies strikes with explicit calls for de-escalation. It refrains from hitting economic infrastructure or symbols of national importance. Pakistan, by contrast, has no non-state actors in India to strike. So when it retaliates, it has to shell villages. We don't keep snakes in our backyard for strategic use and then complain when they bite us or our neighbors. We don't do the dirty work, as the defense minister said, of a superpower via militant proxy. Our security policy is meant to serve the Indian citizen, not to rent out violence to a foreign policy. Who is really wrapping policy in a security clothing? Let me end with what we began. This House believes India's security strategy to Pakistan is populist strategy sold as security policy. Let us look across the border for a moment. Which state has seen repeated military coup justified in the name of national security? Which establishment has built its entire identity around an external Indian threat to the point where rapprochement becomes risky for those in power? Which state's army has real estate, banking, manufacturing, canals, and frozen kebab, and also Bitcoin? I don't say this to sneer at Pakistanis. Many of them are my friends. They are tired of this cycle too. They deserve democratic governance that responds to the needs of the people. They deserve that their elected leaders are released from jail. But if you care, it is in fact the opposite that India provides. Security policy sold and criticized in the honest marketplace of democracy. Mr. President, members of the House, for all of these reasons, I urge you to reject this motion. Not because India is flawless, not because Pakistan is evil, but because its policy is not populism disguised, it is trauma processed, it is international law applied, and it is democracy in motion. We do not sell this war to our people. Our people demand we end the terror. I beg you to oppose the motion.
We are now going to be taking just 2 floor speeches. So I look for a speaker in proposition of the motion. I recognize the member in the 3rd row there.
Dear Mr. Speaker, I believe it is not just India's security policy, but Pakistan's and China's own security policy, the populist rhetorics of its nationalists. Mr. Speaker, I'm not a nationalist because I believe fundamentally that countries don't exist, people do. The idea of an amorphous set of loosely bound identities shared among some people, carried by flags stamped on passports and drawn on maps, is never as real as people themselves. A country doesn't exist. What exists are the people who find a sense of belonging with one another, the land on which they live, and how they decide to live together. And the people of India and Pakistan have lived together for millennia. Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jain, Buddhists. The notion of countries is what the modern political theorist Benedict Anderson called imagined communities. Imagined because the members of even the smallest nation will never know most of their fellow members, never meet them, hear of them, yet in the mind of each other lives the image of their communion. And before the British man came and split the peninsula with his pen, India and Pakistan are each other's companion. We have heard enough of the pain that 2 sides of this house have endured because of the British man's border. I urge you, don't let the British man's pen be our forever curse. And don't let each other's misery be your own politicians' rhetorics. Thank you very much.
I thank the member for their speech. I now look for a speaker in opposition of the motion. I recognize the member in the 2nd row there.
So thank you so much. So firstly, dear fellow people on that side of the motion, they have said something, and some of them are actually that's factual diarrhea, so I had to clear that mess. So firstly, sir said that there has been a proper attempt to change demography of Kashmir. Let me put the straight fact in front of you. Kashmir's demographic population is 96.41% Islam, 2.45% Hinduism, 0.81% Sikhs. So that's the real-time demography of Kashmir, 97%, and you're saying that it's actually a change of demographics. If you know history, then I think that you should know about the mass exodus of Kashmiri Pandits, and that was one of the biggest sort of exodus which happened and which actually changed democracy, and the rivers of Vitasta and Chandrabhag are still evident to it, a culture which started from Raj Tarangini of Kalhan and which had thousands of years of history. It got wiped out in a single night, and it happened due to people of extremist beliefs who were funded, who were supported by people sitting on that side of the border. Now, this is what you have missed. Secondly, you have said that $126 billion of worth of amount is lost due to Pakistan. But I think you should know you reap what you sow. So I think you should remember that. Thirdly, my dear, our very own president, he raised a lot of sort of concern about the democracy in the state that's happening in India. That's perfectly all right. And they're saying that, Modi's India is doing that. They're giving their affairs and they're heading on Pakistan. Sorry, but Indira Gandhi did that too. Lal Bahadur Shastri did that too. And especially Mr. Israr Khan Kakarji was talking about the military might of Pakistan. I think you forgot where was that in 1971 when 93,000, how many 93,000, I hope that's a big number. When 93,000 soldiers, they surrendered. That's your military might. And it's the country of Pakistan which is the only country where generals lose and get more medals, because it is evident that Pakistan's policy towards India is so centralized in its military that their existence is because they show themselves to be in a constant state of war, in a constant state of attack, and that has made them like one of the richest people. Like Fauji Foundation owns some $6 billion worth of things, and Pakistan is run by feudalist, nepotistic people who don't care about what the actual Jamhuriyat can do in Pakistan. Else, you should remember what Faiz Ahmad Faiz said. You should remember what Habib Jalib said. and then work on that rather than just helping and, you know, being sycophantic to the military. This woman, just please, this woman, her father was brutally killed and assassinated by a military dictator, Ziaul Haq, and then her son who came to the Oxford Union, they are in an open agreement with the military. This is not what idealist, this is not what anything sort of means. It's just, okay, yeah, thank you. But I hope you also give that, and yeah, can I?
I'll give it.
Yeah. I hope you didn't mind, that was just my emotions, yeah. Also, I'm not a big nationalist chauvinist, but thank you so much. My name's Sapi Abang.
Sorry.
I thank the members for the speech. That's it for the floor speeches. I now look to Ahmed Nawaz, ex-president, Lady Margaret Hall, to close the case for side proposition.
First of all, I would like to start by thanking Mr. President, Moosa, and also for giving me this speech, first of all, but also to say how happy I am to be speaking alongside both Moosa and Israr, two very good friends of mine, two ex-presidents of the Oxford Union, and two very competent, hardworking, and somewhat charming people. It is truly an honor to stand in this chamber for the fourth time speaking on this podium. A place where ideas have challenged empires, where words have carried weight equal to armies, and where history has often begun with a speech. But tonight is historic for another reason, because for the first time in the Union's history, 3 Pakistani presidents of the Oxford Union are speaking on the same side of the debate, and a fourth one looking at us proudly from the wall over there. Now, they tell us sometimes that Pakistan is a failed state. Well, if this is failure, then may failure keep producing more Oxford Union presidents. And just to say, we're not here as exceptions from Pakistan, but we're here as examples of Pakistan a Pakistan that learns, debates, leads, and insists on being seen in full color and caricature. But Mr. President, this debate is far bigger than national pride because it touches something deeper than flags and borders. It touches the machinery that shapes how nations imagine themselves and how they imagine each other. And that brings me to the motion tonight. The motion tonight, ladies and gentlemen, does not simply ask whether there are security challenges. It asks something far more uncomfortable. Is Pakistan truly treated as a security reason or as a political asset? Is Pakistan a neighbor or has it been turned into a narrative? Tonight, I'm not here to repeat the familiar debates of the past. I want to show to you all here how populism has turned Pakistan not just into an enemy, but into a political instrument. I'll give 3 arguments tonight on side proposition. First, I will show that Pakistan is not obsessed with conflict. It is focused on building a future. Second, I will show how populism has stolen India from its own founding ideals. And third, I will show who truly pays the price for this rivalry. Not governments, but the young people. Mr. President, I must clarify, I stand here not just as a Pakistani, but as someone who believes in what this chamber stands for. That ideas are stronger than fear, and that hope is stronger than hatred. Coming to my first argument, Mr. President, let me begin with one simple truth. Pakistan is not obsessed with India. Pakistan is obsessed with its future. When Indian populism rehearses hostility, Pakistan has been rebuilding, quietly, consistently, and with purpose. Firstly, diplomatically, we have become a regional leader. Pakistan is a key partner in the China's Belt and Road Initiative, not as a conflict zone, as they would tell you, but as a corridor of trade, energy, and connectivity. Secondly, global leaders and American administrations and leaders around the world have publicly praised Pakistan over the last few weeks for its role in regional security, a recognition of cooperation, not of confrontation. And finally, Pakistan continues to host over 3 million Afghan refugees, one of the largest refugee populations in the world. This is not the behavior of a nation seeking conflict. This is the behavior of a nation carrying a responsibility. Internationally, Pakistan has taken serious steps forward. In 2022, we were removed from the FATF grey list after major reforms. Our universities are growing. Our scholars are traveling. Tonight, 3 Pakistani presidents of the Union are sitting here as a living proof. Women now make over half of the higher education enrollment, a quiet but a very powerful statistic. And Mr. President, I have seen this Pakistan with my very own eyes. I survived one of the most tragic terrorist attacks in the history of Pakistan about 10 years ago. I lost my younger brother in that attack, and I lost some of my closest friends. And from that moment, it wasn't a sentiment against India or a sentiment against Afghanistan or a sentiment against a particular group. But in that moment, I made a choice that I would fight for a future where security is not identified by or not defined by hostility, but by opportunity. Since then, I have campaigned across continents, not just for Pakistani children, but for every child left behind by politics and war, whether it's a Palestinian child, whether it's a Syrian child, or whether it's an Indian child. Because pain does not recognize borders, and dignity should not either. That, Mr. President, is the Pakistan that I know of. Not a nation waiting for conflict, but a nation working for connections. I sincerely hope that the young people of India also get the same chance to build, to lead, and to serve. But if they're fed on a diet of populist hostility, if they're radicalized by a narrative instead of elevated by opportunity, then their potential will be sacrificed long before their politics even begin. Interestingly, my predecessors in this debate mentioned that every time India enters into an election cycle, something familiar happens. And you guys would have noticed this. Suddenly, tensions rise, coverage intensifies, a predictable sequence begins. Crisis, media frenzy, nationalist narratives, votes, and that is the order of it. It happened in 2016, it happened in 2019, and it happened more recently in 2025. This is not a defense, it is a dependence. A country facing a threat seeks solutions. A government seeking elections seeks slogans. That, Mr. President, is not a strategy. That is populism dressed as security. Coming on to my second argument on how populism has hijacked India's moral legacy. No, thank you. Once India expanded the imaginations of Asia, today too much of its politics tries to contain it. Mr. President, there was a time when India led Asia not by strength, but by example. A time when India showed the world that power did not need violence, that dignity did not need an army, that freedom did not need fear. It was the India of Nehru, it was the India of Tagore, and an India of Gandhiji. A nation that stood on diplomacy, on pluralism, and on moral courage. But in today's India, those values are no longer politically profitable. And so they are being politically abandoned. And what does this abandonment look like, you may ask? Well, it looks like track 2 diplomacy being shut down. It looks like calls for negotiation being labeled as anti-national. It looks like artists being denied entry, cricketers banned, scholars rejected, not because they pose a threat to the Indian national security, but because they pose a threat to the narrative that they have created in India. It looks like SARC paralyzed, not because failure of dialogue, but because dialogue was never allowed to begin truly. That is when I realized that borders are not just a map. Well, apologies. The moral tragedy of this whole story that I'm talking about is that India once fought colonialism. Today, its own policies use colonial tactics: suspicion, dominance, divide and rule. Let me tell you a very disheartening story that I had a couple of years ago. I was at a global youth conference and I met a young Indian researcher, bright, curious, analytic, an exceptional person. He told me that I follow your work, I admire it. But he joked that he couldn't say this in India because, not because he disagreed with me, but because he feared as being seen disloyal, siding with a Pakistani, for merely seeking common ground. That is when I realized that borders are not just on the map. They are being drawn in ambition, in conversations, and even in imaginations. A country that once inspired the world's moral vocabulary is now teaching its own youth to fear vocabulary itself. So I ask you all here tonight, when diplomacy is branded anti-national, is that national security? Or is it political insecurity disguised as patriotism? When leaders speak of strength but silence dialogue, is that courage? Or is it fear broadcasted through loudspeakers? The motion makes this clear. India's policy towards Pakistan is not designed to solve problems. It is designed to sustain narratives. And while the politics of the past are repeated again and again, the future of South Asia is slipping away quietly. And that, Mr. President, brings me to the final point and the third point in this debate, that the people who will pay the price for this rivalry and the highest price for this rivalry have not even voted yet. Mr. President, South Asia has one of the youngest populations on earth. 65% of our people are under the age of 30. Youth unemployment is over 40%. And yet, we have one of the highest defense budgets of anywhere in the world, one of the lowest education investments of any emerging country in the world. If the leaders of today keep turning to yesterday for direction, the next generations will inherit nothing. I invite everyone to imagine this. Imagine a different horizon. Lahore and Bangalore working together on technology. Karachi and Mumbai shaping climate innovation. Delhi and Islamabad leading in AI and healthcare research. That vision, my friends, is not naive. It is normal everywhere else in the world. Only in South Asia it is treated as dangerous. The truth is, Pakistan does not fear India's potential. Pakistan fears India losing its potential to populism and to politics. Because every year we rehearse the same rivalry, South Asia loses another generation to delay. And delay is the most powerful form of decline. Mr. President, the rivalry may be old, but the cost is paid by the very young. And that is precisely why this motion matters. To conclude, Mr. President, fear has shaped for far too long the politics of South Asia. It has been mistaken for strength by many of the leaders that have come in our history and used as a strategy. But fear does not build, as I said. Fear only delays.
and delay is the quietest form of decline. What this region needs now is not louder voices, not more polarization, not us pointing fingers at each other, but larger visions. Our generation is waiting for us. It's counting on us, not for permissions, but for possibilities. And so I will end with this. The day we give hope a platform is the day progress will begin in South Asia. And I really look forward to the day when the loudest rivalry in South Asia and between Pakistan and India is not on the borders, but is cricket. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening.
I thank the honourable member for his speech. I now look to Siddhan Nagrath, ex-secretary and ex-chief of staff, Keble College, to conclude the case for side opposition.
Pakistan is a state that exists for war. There is only one stable part of Pakistan, and that is its military. It is not its politicians, it is not its economy, it is not even its people, it is its military. It is a country that has defined its idea around the opposition of India. It is a country that has defined its idea around the fact that they must go to war with their neighbors because they cannot satisfy their own people. It is a country that for the last 78 years has turned itself into a single structure that feeds only the rich and elite who sit inside military encampments and who sit inside Islamabad and cares not for the rest of its people. It cannot disavow its military, and it cannot disavow its defensive posture because that is what lets its elite thrive. That is what dooms its people to oblivion. Pakistan has one source of stability, and that is its military. India exists and has its defensive structure in the way that it does because it must respond to the fundamental nature of what its neighbor is. Moosa came up here and told you, oh, I beg for the souls of those Indians who are being ruined by the populism of their country. I tell you, I beg for the souls of those Pakistanis who have yet to experience democracy. Isa came up here and told you, oh, in Baluchistan, there are Indian proxies who weave terror and there is nothing that can be done. I tell you, the reason Kashmir remains the most militarized place in the world is because of Pakistani terror groups that are funded by the ISI that prevent peace from coming to that region. Ahmad came up here and told you, oh look, our diaspora is so great. Our scholars travel, they learn things, they do things. But there is one country whose academic institutions rank highest in the world. There is one country whose people now lead the world's global companies, who stand across the world, whether it be in Africa, in India, in Asia, in Europe, in America, and stand as the CEOs, the leaders, the scientists, and the researchers that are pushing the world forward. And those are Indians. I do not stand here to hate upon Pakistan. In fact, it brings me much sadness. My family lived in Lahore before partition. Some of my closest friends in Oxford are people who will not be able to come to my house in India because they cannot travel there. There are people whose houses I cannot visit in Pakistan because it becomes a security threat. That is not the world that we want to live in, but that is the world that we are forced to live in because India's military strategy, India's defense strategy is not a response to populism. It is not a construction of populism. It is a response to the truth that they have known for the last 77 years. It is the truth that Pakistan will do what it takes to bring military action against India. What all three speakers on side proposition told you is that, oh, Pakistan is a great nuclear power that has exercised restraint. Look at us. We have been so kind. We have been so nice. We have done nothing. India is a global power. We have a nuclear arsenal that works. We have one of the largest militaries in the world. We have tanks and planes and troops that could storm Pakistan, but we do not. Why? Because we are a country that exercises restraint. We are a country that is focused on de-escalation. We are a country that has chosen the path of peace because what do we have? We have an economy that is nearly worth $5 trillion.
We have a growing population that does not face the same unemployment crisis that Pakistan does. We do not have a country where the majority of our money goes to our defense budget because we do not feel the need to give that much money to our defense budget because we know that we can focus on our own people. We know that we can focus on our population. India continues to grow and India continues to thrive, but Pakistan continues to fund its military. So India must respond because when India is attacked, it cannot stay silent because their neighbors will not stand back. Their neighbors will not back down because it is politically infeasible. It is economically infeasible to the individuals who hold the money, who hold the power, who hold the politics in Pakistan to not have war happen. Because when war happens between our two nations, when there is conflict, when there is difficulty, it is not Modi's electoral prospects that are bettered. It is the bank accounts of Pakistani politicians and generals that most benefit. Those are the people who are most benefited by this conflict, nobody else. And civilians on both sides of the border pay the price for that. I am terrified of war between our two countries. All 6 speakers who have spoken in this debate have families in cities that would be the first cities to be struck if a nuclear conflict was to break out. Almost every analysis of geopolitics analyzes India and Pakistan as one of those weak safe points where nuclear war might in fact break out. That is a dangerous place to be. That is a dangerous question of brinkmanship. That is a question India does not want to face. Because India does not only know its potential, it is living out its potential. India is not a country that needs populism because India is not a country that is suffering. India is a country that is growing, that is advancing, that is bettering its economy and bettering the happiness of its people. Increasing in investment, increasing in startups, increasing in technological development, increasing in foreign direct investment, increasing in educational institutions. Why would we want a populist strategy that sells us defense? We have a defense strategy that exists because unfortunately our neighbors give us no other choice. In Hindi and Urdu there is a saying, apne pair par kulhadi marna. That is what Pakistan have done. Loosely it translates to shooting yourself in the foot. Because while Pakistan may be the greatest victim of terrorism in South Asia, they have groomed those terrorists. They have funded those terrorists. They have ensured that those terrorists have a home to be in. They have given them weapons. They have trained them. They have provided them with military aid, intelligence support, and directions into where to strike, how to strike, where to go. And when those terrorist troops attack their own people, then they say, oh no, we are the victims over here. Yes, you may be the victims, but you are the victims of the actions of your own elite. You are the victims of a defense strategy and an intelligence thesis that was devised on the basis of the fact that we won't strike ourselves, we'll have terrorist groups do it for us. It'll be far more convenient that way. What option does that leave their neighbors with? What option does that leave a state with that must look to its own safety? That knows that not only does it have a neighbor that holds nuclear power, but it has a neighbor that holds nuclear power and it is unstable. That they do not know who the Prime Minister of Pakistan will be tomorrow because they do not know when the next military coup will strike. They do not know who truly holds power because what is the case when half of the industry of the entire country is owned again by those same individuals who own the military? We all look to the same vision of peace. We all look to the same vision of happiness. We look for a world where we can travel between both countries, where Pakistanis and Indians can watch the same movies not just in theatres in the United Kingdom, but in theatres in Islamabad and Delhi. We look towards a world where this division does not exist. But for that, do not let side opposition dress this debate up for you in pretty rhetorical flourish. They have told you, oh, this is what we want. This is the future we look for. But India, Modi, oh, so sad. All these, saffron, Hindu-wielding nationalists, they've constructed this world where we just can't have peace. I'm sorry, only one of us has a defense budget that's almost half of our GDP. Only one of us has a country where people will come up and say, I will sacrifice my life for Pakistan, because Indian citizens do not feel the need to do that. It is a simple world to look at why we have the defense strategy we do. Because it is not something that has changed since Modi came into power. In fact, it has been the same strategy that has existed for so long, and not right now. I was the president, no. And not right now. Because, quite simply, we have practiced the same thing. We ask for diplomacy. We don't want to be on the edge of nuclear war. We send diplomats, we have discussions, we play cricket. Look, if the ICC listens to the BCCI more than anyone else, I can't do anything about that, we're just better at the game. But we have worked to have peace. And it is only when we have been faced with nothing but threats to our own sovereignty, our own safety, when our own people have been sacrificed on the altar of this senseless, endless war that is carried on since the creation of both of our states, do we respond. And in those scenarios, how do we respond? Do we march the tanks that we can? Do we send in the navy that we can? Do we send in the jets that we can? Do we deploy the missiles that we can that actually work, unlike the Pakistani ones? No. We do limited surgical strikes, limited operations, enough to send a message, enough to say, no, your actions will not stand, enough to say we are a country that is willing to defend ourselves even if we have better things to do than deal with you. But how do the Pakistani populace respond? They don't respond with peace. They don't respond with kindness. They don't respond by listening to the message. They don't engage in good faith discussions to take this forward. So it is truly Pakistan that is the problem that we must first solve, to engage in a system where we can reach this peace. And that is what is most important to understand for this debate. India is a country that is growing, expanding, and moving forward in its path of advancement. It is a country that has not changed its military strategy or its posture, no thank you, Isra, or its posture in the last 77 years. It is a country that has simply grown out of trauma, difficulty, and pain. It is a country that has seen its fathers, its brothers, its uncles, and its grandparents lose their lives in a senseless, violent war. And the same is true for Pakistan. The same is true for both countries in this war. Because since partition, we have been ripped apart and treated as enemies. There is no need for this enmity. There is a need for peace. And there is a way forward to that peace. And it would be in the interest of any populist government, regardless of where it might be, to seek the economic gain that would come from the happiness of both of these countries joining their hands together in trade, in partnership, in development, to not waste their time deploying their militaries and their troops across their borders, to not waste their time engaging in this senseless, violent war. But until Pakistan changes, India will defend itself because it has nothing else to do. I beg you to oppose. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was it for the debate. And I just want to say a couple of things. It was, this is brilliant, the fact that, we have 6 friends, 3 Pakistanis, 3 Indians, and they can sit down and come in this chamber and have a great debate and have a great time and be civil. And this gives us a lot of hope for the future. And this is what the Oxford Union is about. If it's your first time here, once I put the motion towards the House, you could vote on the motion depending on which side of the door you walk through. So if you want to vote for the proposition, you walk through the ayes. If you want to vote for the opposition, you walk through the nays. And that's all. So now it gives me great pleasure to put the motion before the House, that this House believes India's policy towards Pakistan is a populist strategy sold as security policy. Thank you so much for coming to the debate. And with that, I remain Moosa Harraj, Balliol College, and your president. Thank you.